And could you bring us up to date on what provisions of the 2018 law will now?
Yes. Yeah. So when the legislature passed the 2018 law, it did start with a gradual income tax reduction. And so our top rate was 8.98%. It then was lowered in 2019 down to 8.53. And so that's where we're at today. But now with the removal of the triggers, with them being eliminated in 2023, our top rate will now be 6.5%. And then we also condensed some of those brackets. So we'll have 4 brackets with a low rate of being 4.4%. And just to give an idea of, so incomes over 75,000 will be taxed at that 6.5%. Those earning between 30,000 and 75,000 will be at 5.7%. Individuals earning 6,000 to 30,000, 4.82%. And then those 6,000 and under will be at the lowest rate, 4.4%. So those will be the 4 new brackets for individual income tax. Now, the other thing too that the 2018 bill did is that this year the corporate tax rate was reduced. And so previously Iowa had the highest in the nation at 12% top rate. And now we will have a corporate tax top rate of 9.8%, which ties us with our neighbors to the north in Minnesota. And then that also will have 4 brackets. And so you'll have a lower bracket of 9% and then 2 brackets at 5.5%, with that being 5.5 being the lowest. And so so we're seeing that 2018 bill was very comprehensive in nature. And so one other thing I just want to point out that what's important about the bill was that it broadened the sales tax base. And so in response to the court ruling in Wayfair v. South Dakota, the 2018 measure basically taxed online sales and certain electronic purchases. And so that really was influential during the pandemic, because a lot of people were buying stuff online, and of course it brought more, I think, a more fair process to especially your brick and mortar businesses across Iowa. And so now with a lot of the online big box stores that are having to do sales tax, that certainly helps with our revenue. So I think that was another positive thing of the 2018 bill.
The dramatic decrease in income tax, personal income taxes. I understand also there is no longer deductibility for federal.
Yes, yeah, that will be, that'll be eliminated once we get to 2023, and that was a trade-off of part of that 2018 bill, was that in order to get to 6.5%, we would lose federal deductibility. And a lot of this originated because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that had been passed by Congress and signed by President Trump, which also Iowa has now a rolling conformity now with the federal tax code, and so that was sort of a driver of this tax reform.
Do you have some sense for what the net effect with the lower rates and the absence of federal deductibility might be on an individual?
There could be, I think for some middle and lower income earners, there'll be some savings, but when you have federal deductibility eliminated, you might see some of the upper income earners that would actually see a tax increase as a result of that. And I think one important thing that comes out of this recent tax bill that the governor just signed is that it's certainly repealing the triggers, I think, was a good thing, but it shows us that we have more work to do in terms of lowering those rates, because you still have, in a sense of still very high income tax rates. But so in terms of that, I do think with federal deductibility gone, some of your higher earners might actually see a tax increase.
I was interested in looking at some of these rankings that various sources put out, and the state of Iowa always took a shellacking because of the relatively high income tax percentages, but frequently they forgot to bring in the fact that federal deductibility reduced the
Yes.
effective rate so significantly. So hopefully this will help us also in putting out the word. I think
Yes. Yeah. I think
people,
that's
go ahead.
yeah, that's a fair point. And the other thing too is a lot of times Iowa has a very complex system of tax credits, which sort of cushion high rates as well, but certainly federal deductibility was a big part of that I think a lot of rankings didn't take into consideration. Now that's gone, so it's going to be even more important to lower those rates. And,
Well, I
and
think,
if,
go
if I
ahead.
could just add one more thing, and the trend, the trend we're seeing is that states are lowering rates. In fact, Arizona just passed a flat tax. I think they're down to it's either 2 or 2.5%, and Montana has done some tax reform, and so I think as the states are competing for people and jobs, it's going to be more important for Iowa to have a more competitive tax code.
And I think that will be borne out even more when the new census data comes out.
Yes. Yeah.
The preliminaries I've seen indicate that the high tax states such as New York, Illinois, et cetera, are losing population and representation also because
Yes.
of that in
Yeah.
Congress.
Yeah.
People do vote not only corporately but individually with their feet, and
Yes. Yeah.
there are some things that are occurring because of that population-wise. Well, I appreciate that, John. Any other comments on the new tax structure from an
No,
income standpoint?
I think one thing, and that's something that Chris mentioned, is that it's going to provide more certainty for people and businesses. And so I think eliminating the triggers was the right thing to do. And it just it just shows also just that there's more work to be done. And so I'd agree with Chris's point on that.
Well, and I also appreciate you bringing to the attention of our group the fact that now we have additional revenue from sales tax on the things coming over purchased over the internet, and the
Yeah.
impact that also has on our local businesses. While we're talking, you also are pretty knowledgeable in the area of inheritance tax. We in the state had kind of a unique position in that we were one of 6 states that still had an inheritance tax. The tax rates were up to 15%, if I am correct. What happened in the law with respect to inheritance tax?
Yeah, the inheritance tax is another one of those that were basically, as you said, I was one of 6 states and that had that. So this has been a trend as well, where states are getting rid of the inheritance tax because it's just seen as obsolete and really not fair to the taxpayer. And so Iowa had already several years ago in a previous legislature had done some reform to the inheritance tax. And so basically it only applied to individuals that were not exempt under the law. And so you're right, anywhere depending on what the inheritance was, the tax rate was 5 to 15%. And now what the legislature did was phase that out. And so basically we'll see a 20% phase out over 4 years. And by January of 2025, Iowa will have the inheritance tax completely eliminated. And so now, for example, if a a farmer who has does not have a wife or children and wants to leave that farm, or even maybe if it's a business uh, uh, to someone else who's not a direct descendant, now that individual will not be subject to the inheritance tax. And one story that really kind of made me think about this issue was a young family that had contacted us to share this story, and her this lady's great uncle, his family had unfortunately passed away. His wife had died, and his only son had passed away, and so he left in his will basically um, a variety of financial gifts to his great nephews and nieces, and they were for their college education funds. And because Iowa has inheritance tax, a big chunk of that was taxed away. And so, and that's why a lot of people argue that's not necessarily fair, because, that great uncle had worked and saved and put that money away, and then a large chunk of it then is now taxed away. So I think what the legislature did was a fairly good thing to get rid of this kind of obsolete tax that, and it's called, a lot of people just refer to it even as the death tax, where, it's just something that is not necessarily the best tax policy.
And so my understanding, as you were pointing out, it's phased out over a period of years, about 20% per year.
Yes, yeah, and so by 2025, that will be when it officially is eliminated.
So if you have your choice, don't die
Yeah,
before then.
that's right, yeah, yeah.
So often we, pardon me, hear the discussion and the impact on farmers, and that's not the only impact. I was in the construction business, and boy, I know a number of small construction firms that were jeopardized their longevity and continuing existence by inheritance. So passing it from one generation to the next was significant. So this will be helpful not only for farmers, but small businesses and others as
Yes.
well.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think a lot of times we automatically think of farms because of, the rich farming heritage of Iowa, but, it impacts small business owners. And then in the case of the story that was shared with me, financial gifts that were bestowed on people as well for, college funds and whatever it might be. And so it does have a direct impact on Iowans.
John, looking down here at the chat, there is a question, does Iowa still have, we were speaking of the inheritance tax.
Mhm.
Somebody's questioned an estate tax.
Yeah,
Are you familiar?
Yes, Iowa does not have an estate tax. I believe there's still a federal estate tax. I'm not sure what the rate of that is off the top of my head, but Iowa does not have that. The estate tax does not apply in Iowa.
Another item in the chat room that goes back to our previous discussion with respect to income tax. Apparently, the capital gains deduction has been removed. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So significant things. Gosh, when I got into the 28 divisions in this bill,
Yeah.
it does take somebody intimately familiar with taxes to
Yes.
assist me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mine are pretty simple.
Well, there's nothing easy about tax or government finance. I mean, there's nothing simple about it.
John, I appreciate your observations on the inheritance tax. Anything else with respect to the bill you'd like to share?
No, I just, with Iowa eliminating that, I think it only leaves Nebraska now in our region that has the inheritance tax. And,
Wow.
and so Nebraska was trying to get that done in their session too, and I don't believe they accomplished that. So, we're really seeing a pattern here among the states to get rid of that form of taxation.
Well, I appreciate that. Let's move on to some additional divisions. Thank you, John. We'll look forward to your additional comments
Yes.
as we proceed.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Art.